3, 4.
Hello everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC. We're also streaming on nccradio.org. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. The program is repeated every Sunday evening at 11 p.m. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This of course depends when you are listening and joining us. So hello on the radio, hello online, hello to the world. Today I'm going to dedicate our thoughts to the upcoming marriage of Serena and Eric, who are getting married today, B'shar Tov U'Metzlachas, at an auspicious and blessed moment. So I'd like to share with you some ideas about Jewish marriage. How can we raise the prospects for an enduring marriage? But first, I want to share with you that in Chabad circles, part of the ceremony includes the reading of a letter, the blessing that Rabbi Shnis and the Rebbe would send to all the brides and grooms who would invite him to their wedding. And he would send them back a beautiful blessing. And we hope this blessing will, of course, be fulfilled with both Serena and Eric, also known as Sarah and Avram and Sarah. This is the letter that will be read at the wedding. By the grace of God, greeting and blessing. In reply to your letter in which you write about your forthcoming marriage, I am confident that both you and your chosen partner in life have firmly resolved to establish a truly Jewish home on the foundations of Torah and mitzvahs. In addition to the essential aspect of living up to the Jewish way of life in accordance to God's will, this is also the channel to receive God's blessings and to ensure lasting happiness materially and spiritually. May God grant that your marriage take place in a happy and auspicious hour and be an everlasting edifice, with blessings of Mazel Tov, and the letter is always signed by the Rebbe himself. So Mazel Tov to the upcoming wonderful wedding. And, today it's important for us to consider what would be some of the secrets of an enduring marriage, an everlasting edifice. I'm going to suggest there are actually, three main points that work wonders. The first I would headline as respect. The first ingredient in a successful relationship is respect. Respect is even more important to a successful marriage than love. Love is critical, but your marriage can't survive without respect. We respect our spouse as the person who makes us whole. Respect means that we don't take each other for granted. Respect means that we value the gift our spouse made in giving him or herself to us. Respect means to cherish this gift and never speak of it casually, always showing gratitude that our spouse chose to share our lives. Respect also means that we never betray our spouse's privacy. We don't talk about them behind their back to a therapist, to our friends, or to our parents. We certainly don't share private details about them with others. If we need to talk about our relationship with someone, we seek our spouse's consent first. If we cherish our spouse's privacy and they know that their private vulnerabilities are safe with us, they will share the deepest secrets with us. This makes for a vibrant marriage. Finally, respect allows us to resolve our differences. It provides a formula through which we can resolve most of our inevitable differences on a platform of mutual respect. That's number one. Number two is love. The second ingredient in a successful marriage is love. How do we learn to love? Learn the art of selflessness. Love is the art of receiving pleasure from seeing our loved one happy. To love means that we would rather spend our last dollar on what our loved one wants than on what we want. Not because we don't care to be happy, but because our happiness comes from our loved one's pleasure. Most of our relationships are not like that. We engage with most people because we like how they make us feel. They might be fun or interesting. They might enjoy the same things that we do, or we might have shared interests. These are what we would call self-oriented relationships. The problem is that the deeper a relationship becomes, the more we expect to give, not just take or receive. If the relationship becomes loving, the entire relationship must be about the other. Love is the language of selflessness. If our spouse loves us and we want to reciprocate, we need to learn the art of selflessness. Life doesn't train us to be selfless. In fact, life trains us to look out for ourselves. Most of what we achieve before marriage serves us. We get an education because we want a degree. We get a job because we want to make an income. We make friends because we enjoy their company. Marriage is different. Marriage is other-oriented. And unless we learn how to speak the language of selflessness, our marriage will be an endless tug of war. So how do we get around this conundrum? By remembering that marriage is not a negotiation between me unit and the he or she unit. Marriage is about creating the we unit. It begins rather selfishly. We think about what kind of person we want to marry and choose according to our checklist. But once we marry, we realize quickly that it is not about what I want, it is about what works for the unit. Before marriage, if I need to catch a flight, I think in terms of which flight is most convenient to me. After marriage, I think in terms of which flight is most convenient for us. We can't shift into this mode of thinking overnight. So it begins as a hybrid. I will take the flight that brings me home earlier because if it makes my spouse happy, I will be happy too. I will order what my spouse likes for supper because if my spouse is happy, I will be happy too. This shifts our mind from me to the we unit. My happiness is concurrent with my spouse's happiness. Over time, we merge and become a single unit. We no longer think of, I will be happy if my spouse is happy. Instead, we think of, we do X or Y, we will be happy. When things happen, we respond to them together. When problems occur, we solve them together. When questions arise, we answer them together. When challenges occur, we face and overcome them together. We become a unit. We slowly go from being separate units to becoming a single unit until we revert to our original state. We become a single entity. We can intuit what the other feels or thinks about asking them. Even without asking them, we can feel each other's joy and feel each other's pain. This is encapsulated in the famous story, dear friends, about Rabbi Aryeh Levine. He passed away in 1969. He was known as the Tzaddik of Jerusalem. He exemplified this ideal. The Talmud proclaims, a man's wife is as his own body. Ishto kegufay. On one occasion, when accompanying his wife to a Jerusalem clinic, he explained to the physician, Doctor, my wife's foot ails us. Can you imagine such a feeling? Now to the third ingredient to a well-balanced marriage. The third ingredient for a respectful relationship is that we each give each other what the other needs. The Torah tells us that a husband needs to feel validated, and respected. And a wife needs to feel cherished and nourished. Of course, both need both. But validation is primary for the husband, and feeling cherished is more important to the wife. God made husband and wife symbiotic. What one needs, the other has. When we give what we each give and what the other needs, we empower each other and give us what we need. A husband needs to feel important and powerful. A wife has the ability to make him feel that way in spades. When she allows him to take care of her and compliments him on how comfortable and safe she feels with him, she empowers him. There is nothing that a husband would not do for a wife who makes him feel good about himself. When she encourages him and compliments him about the things he does well, he feels validated. And a man will do anything for a person who validates him. But listen, my friends, in turn, when a husband cherishes and nourishes his wife, protects her, provides for her, and views her welfare and happiness as his sacred responsibility, it makes her feel special. There's nothing a wife wouldn't do for a husband who cherishes her and makes her feel special. For a husband who makes her feel that when she is present, no one else exists for him. When the husband cherishes and nourishes his wife, he empowers her to validate and respect him. When the wife respects and validates her husband, she empowers him to cherish and nourish her. It is symbiotic and it grows with time, but only if we keep the cycle alive. As the cycle continues, it picks up steam, and eventually husband and wife evolve with each other and become one. It is inevitable that life's pressures and distractions get in the way and slow down the cycle. We might be distracted for a while and become less conscientious about each other. At first, the cycle will continue to flow unimpeded, but over time, it will slow down and even grind to a halt. Sometimes it might even start cycling in the opposite direction. We need to be alert for these signs before they become a problem. If we catch the shift before it becomes dramatic, it is easy to get back on the track. If we wait too long, it might be harder to get back on track. But if the basic ingredients are in place, we can start the cycle back up again. It is the role of a therapist or a mentor to gauge the speed of the cycle and to be alert for changes in velocity. If and when that happens, a trained, objective, professional can help to get the person back on track. This, my friends, is the Torah's secret to an enduring marriage. But let me just conclude on this point. If a person follows the formula of two half souls, that means husband and wife are two halves of the same soul, you can find the answer to almost any question that plagues most people about marriage. The questions that make so many marriages flounder and fall apart. The more you learn about the Jewish approach to dating and marriage, the easier it will follow its formula for success. And I encourage all those who are looking to get married, may you do so with our blessings. Think about these ideas as well. There's much more. If anybody would like to have further information and insight, feel free to call me after the program at 516-739-3636. Important, dedicated, these thoughts are dedicated to our good friends, that is Serena and Eric, who are getting married. In the summer of 1950, Rabbi Leibel Posner proposed to his future wife, Tirza, and she happily accepted. Standing under the Williamsburg Bridge, the newly engaged couple dropped a few cents into a payphone and called the Rebbe's office, Rabbi Schneer's office, to report the good news. In the course of the conversation, the Rebbe asked Rabbi Posner, when two people marry, what is the reason for the great joy that ensues? Just as the cycle of life ends people married to create new life, the Rebbe said, acknowledging their own mortality. If that is the case, why would it be such a joyous occasion? And the Rebbe, the cause for joy, the Rebbe explained. In heaven, each soul is divided into two. One half is placed in a male body and the other in the female. At a wedding, we rejoice that the divided soul has now been reunited. Another important aspect of a Jewish wedding, I would call it the three circles. A Talmudical sage was once asked, since the creation of the world, what does God do? And the sage answered, God spends his time pairing men and women for marriage. Pairing soulmates is as difficult as the splitting of the sea of reeds. In order that the marriage should be sound, there are three partners, the woman, the man, and God. In Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, God's presence is often represented by being encircled. Therefore, the encircling at a Jewish wedding of the three partners to bring a loftier level of spirituality in their marriage and to be able to overcome the tribulations which unity can be fraught with. How do we see this? The bride circles the groom 7 times. The groom places a circular wedding band on her finger, and the wedding canopy encircles, embraces them as they begin a new life together. So, have this in mind, and for all out there who are attending weddings or getting married, we extend our heartfelt best wishes that everything should go well in a good hour and an auspicious moment with blessings for so many good years. Now, I'd like to continue our conversation today by talking about the Jewish art of building healthy self-esteem. Raising children, for example, in contemporary society seems like a car on that cliff. It's challenging, it's scary, it's unsure. There's a story in the newspaper caught my eye recently. It described a study done at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. In the study, 1,500 American children from diverse socio-economic backgrounds were polled. It was found that 82% of children going into first grade had a positive self-image. Years later, the same children were polled upon entering high school. The results, that time, were reversed. Only 18% of the children had a positive self-image. When the same kids were polled graduating high school, only 8% still had a good self-image. There is something amiss if so many children lose their self-worth in the course of their school years. The question is, what can we do? And on this, the Torah has something simple and profound to say. It emerges in a fascinating parallel between the first and last books of the Torah, of the Bible. The book of Genesis concludes with Jacob on his deathbed blessing his 12 sons. Deuteronomy concludes with Moses on the eve of his death blessing the 12 tribes of Israel. Read closely. There's a striking difference between Jacob's words to his eldest son Reuben and Moses' words to the eldest tribe of Reuben. Who was Reuben? We see more than one occasion where Reuben disappointed Jacob. As the eldest son, he bore primary responsibility for Joseph's safety when he was away from home. Yet he failed to rescue Joseph at that critical moment, and on his deathbed, Jacob had some rather harsh and critical words for Reuben. He said, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, preeminent in strength, unstable as water." Moses, too, had his disappointments with the tribe of Reuben. During the 40 years, he led the Jews, the Hebrews, through the wilderness. The two infamous rabble-rousers, Dathan and Abiram, were Reubenites. The Korah rebellion, the single most dangerous challenge to Moses' leadership, in which 250 princes rose up against Moses, was largely inspired by Dosan and Aviram and Oin ben Peles, all descendants of Reuben. Yet Moses' blessing to this tribe said, "May Reuben live and not die, and may his tribe be significant in number." How could Moses bless the tribe of Reuben after having endured a great deal of hardship from the aspirations that they cast on him and the rebellions that they instigated? How is it that he was so forgiving when Jacob, Reuben's own father, doesn't seem as tolerant as Moses? One possible answer: Jacob and Moses represent two models of education. We'll call them expectation versus embracing. A good parent and educator does two things: sees the child for what he or she is at the moment, with all of his or her flaws and shortcomings, and then challenges the child to fix those flaws. At the same time, a good parent and educator sees the greatness of the child at that moment. Each approach on its own is profoundly insufficient. If we only see the flaws, the child feels worthless. If we only embrace them the way they are, you fail to allow them to become what they're capable of becoming. It is a very sensitive balance. And that is the tension captured in the two persons of Jacob and Moses. Jacob is critical. A parent often sees what is missing in his child. Is this the best you can do? 98%? Why not 100%? You got an A. Hey, why not an A+? If you would have studied a little bit more, we all heard that. A parent is often very challenging and demanding. Indeed, there's a sense of urgency we feel to challenge our children to become everything they can be, to emerge from the setbacks with a new resolve that the future be better than the present. But that's not enough. We must also employ the example of Moses to give confirmation to our children, give them the dignity and the sense of confidence that each of them is great in his or her unique way. We must show them how we recognize their strengths and empower them to recognize them as well. Moses was a model Jewish teacher. He sees a child, understands his strengths and challenges, and inspires him to be the best he can be according to his capacity. May Reuben live, Moses declares. Reuben is not Joseph or Judah. He has his own shortcomings, but he can live, prosper, and achieve wonderful things unique to himself. Reuben, unstable as water, is a potential that can go either way. Channeled correctly, Reuben can accomplish great things. Like water, it can be a source of blessing, but if not properly channeled, it can damage the environment and flood its surroundings. So it came to pass, Reuben was once unable to act boldly and decisively to save his brother, would later become the tribe that marched courageously in the front lines of the battle for the promised land and bore the brunt of the campaign. As we all know, Reuben, Gad, and half of Shevet Manasseh, they went ahead to help conquer and settle the land of Israel. Indeed, only after Israel proper, west of the Jordan, had been conquered and settled by the other tribes, would Reuben return to the lands allotted to the east. So perhaps as a result of Moses' coaxing and his extracting the inner strength of Reuben, was finally brought to the fore and manifested as the positive force it always was meant to be. Thus the difference between the way Jacob saw his son and how Moses saw the tribe of Reuben. The Mishnah tractate of us, known as the Ethics of the Fathers, contains a passage that on the surface seems out of place. Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Zakkai, had 5 outstanding disciples. The list is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yossi the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Nathanael, and the Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And he would recount their praise. Eliezer, he would say, ben Hyrcanus, he's to be compared to a cemented cistern which doesn't lose a drop. Joshua ben Hananiah, happy is she who gave birth to him. Yossi the priest, a most pious man. Shimon ben Nesanel, a man who fears sin. Eliezer ben Aruch, describing his qualities, is like a spring flowing with ever-increasing vigor. What is odd about the passage that it appears in a text about ethics of the fathers. Why do we need to know who Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's students were and what he said about them? This belongs in history, not in ethics. Understanding Moses' model of education, we can now have an answer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai loved his students, and he was able to show them that each was great in their unique way. His compliments were not generic. In each, he identified the students' very specific talents. Rabbi Eliezer was a man of memory. Rabbi Eliezer, the other one, Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach, was creative, and so on. This is how we were able to raise such remarkable disciples. This is a lesson in ethics, not only in history. By identifying what each could become, he helped them achieve it. The ethical message is clear. Being a teacher involves more than just communicating knowledge. It requires empathy between teacher and student, cultivation and praise of their special gifts, encouragement by the positive reinforcement. This is the essential part of education. A young boy was watching his father reviewing his appalling school report card that was filled with E's and F's. The boy asked his dad with artful innocence, "What do you think the trouble with me is, hereditary or environmental?" In spite of the challenging surroundings, a caring teacher can make all the difference, as the following story beautifully illustrates, which I'd love to share with you today. A professor once gave a group of graduate students his assignment. Go to the slums, take 200 boys between the ages of 12 and 16, investigate their backgrounds and environment, then predict their chances for the future. The students, after consulting social statistics, talked to the boys, compiled data, and concluded that 90% of the boys were bound to spend some time in jail. 25 years later, another group of graduate students were given the job of testing the prediction. They went back to the same area. Some of the boys, by then grown up, were still there. Some had moved away, but they got in touch with 180 of the original 200. They found that only 4 of the group had ever been behind bars. Why was it that these people, who had lived in a breeding place of crime and immorality, had emerged surprisingly with such good records? In interviews with the men, researchers were repeatedly told, well, there was a certain teacher. They pressed further and found that 75% of the cases, the teacher was the same woman. The researchers went to this teacher, now living in a retirement home. They asked how she exerted this remarkable influence over the children. Could she give them any reason why her students should remember her? No, she said, I really couldn't. And then thinking back over the years, she said musingly, more to herself than the questioners, you know, I really loved those boys. The greatest teachers are not only those with the gift of instruction. They are the people who value their students, love them, and get them to believe in themselves, who have the ability to teach with feeling, not only with clarity. The highest tribute Judaism could pay Moses, our greatest leader, was called him Moshe Rabbeinu, which translates Moses, our teacher. Rabbeinu from the word Rav, which means maximum. Moses had many things: leader, redeemer, prophet, lawgiver, military strategics, and a commander-in-chief. But none of these were deemed nearly as praiseworthy as the greatest thing Moshe did, which was to teach. And in the Torah concept, to teach is to maximize the gifts and potential of your students. The art of effective parenting and teaching, the most important occupations in the world, lies in the balance between expressions of expectation and expressions of love. I'm sure you remember the famous Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky, a noted Hasidic teacher, author, and psychiatrist. He was always fond of reflecting upon the manner in which his father would discipline him in his youth for an action which was that he disapproved. In a very calm, firm, and non-nonsense tone, the elder Rabbi Twersky, his father, would say in Yiddish, "Es passt nicht. This does not become you." 3 simple and subtle words speak volumes. The child was not being told that he was bad or unworthy. On the contrary, he was being guided not to do something because that particular behavior was beneath him. Es passt nicht meant that he is just too good for that sort of thing. This is the diametric opposite of an insult. Instead of emphasis of being placed on the wrong, it was being placed on him. He was above that behavior. Es passt nicht. Inherent within the very rebuke was the greatest compliment. Being as you are a person of excellence, this is simply incompatible, out of character for you to do this. The elder Rabbi Twersky most likely never read any psychological works on parenting. Undoubtedly, he too had been told es passt nicht, as his father and grandfather before him, all the way back to the days when the proud people were told, "You shall be a kingdom of priests and a sacred people." They were given a list of practices from which they must abstain for one overriding reason: es passt nicht. Kings and priests have no place in the gutter. The story is told of a disciple who once had a private meeting with Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi, the first Chabad Rebbe. The man was overcome with a profound sense of reverence as he stood before the Holy Man. As customary, he handed the Rebbe his kvittel, a note of introduction, outlining the issues he wished for the Rebbe to address during his meeting. The Rebbe reviewed the man's note, which basically comprised a laundry list of items for which he was seeking the Rebbe's blessings and prayers. He wanted success in this and that venture, good health, a nice home, affluence, nachas from his children, etc., etc. Upon concluding his reading, the Rebbe thought for a moment, looked up at the disciple and said, "I see you've given quite a bit of thought to what you need. This is good. My question is, have you given nearly as much thought to where you are needed, to why and how and where you are needed by God here on this earth?" It's a question we should all think about. The Chassid walked out of the room with a newfound sense of responsibility and with joy all at once. On the one hand, he perceived the Rebbe's subtle rebuke for his having been caught in his own materialistic and self-absorbed needs. On the other hand, with those very same words, the Rebbe was lifting him to the highest heights, inspiring him with the awareness, you are needed, you are needed. You were handpicked. Each and every one of us are handpicked by God to accomplish certain things in this world. Hashem knows your talents, and He knows the needs of the world. This is why you are here. This is an act only you can do, and only at this time, in this place. Your life has great meaning and purpose. Yes, God Himself needs you. This message lifted the man's spirits beyond measure, even as he felt charged with deep responsibility. To rejoice together with a sense of responsibility is not the paradox. To rebuke with love is not a contradiction, but is the very essence of a healthy, nurturing, and appropriate education. It has been said that criticism is like a scalpel, which cuts in an operation. It can either heal or, God forbid, destroy. When it comes to a medical operation, only the most skilled and knowledgeable surgeon should take it upon himself or herself to make an incision which will lead to the improvement of someone's health. If the surgeon is not totally devoted to helping and curing the patient, or hasn't the skills to perform the delicate procedure, he or she has no right making, of course, the cut in the first place. Even then, the most carefully performed incision still leaves a painful wound. So before we criticize another, especially a child, even if we have the best of intentions for the person's well-being, we should tread very carefully. We must be aware that our remarks can cause pain, and as such, be ready to apply all necessary remedies to the wound, so that the cut, in fact, brings about healing and not just bleeding. Think about being a teacher or a parent. Think of the influence we have on our children, or the influence our teachers and parents had on us. Is there anything that made a greater difference? Not just for a day, but over a lifetime. Who does not carry memories of a childhood of parents and teachers, of words or deeds that hurt us or made us stand tall? Those are the things we never forget, and they shape our image of who we are. If they injure, we can spend much of our adult life trying to relieve the pain. But if they gave us love and self-confidence, it stays with us through the years. Tell your child you love him or her, and in that one act of letting them know that they are loved, you give them the strength to love in return, and the confidence to strive and to thrive in difficult places. Torah and its mitzvahs teach us how to do this with a sense of wisdom and with a sense of balance. All it takes is a few moments of our time and our loving heart. The unknown person inside each young student is our hope for the future. In each child, there burns a moral and very sacred spark, which, if properly nurtured, molded and motivated, and developed into its fullest potential, can light up the world. And that, dear friends, is such an important message that all of us must recognize and to live that way within our own family, within our own community, to appreciate that every one of us has a mission, and as we interact with the world, to be a balanced individual in all different areas. You want to be a parent-like or a parent, fine, but also be a teacher. If you want to be a teacher, also have the feelings of a parent. Both aspects are so important. Therefore, we get this difference between how Jacob blessed his firstborn child, Reuben, and yet, years later, Moses, who is the teacher, when he blesses Reuben, the tribe of Reuben, he sees it a little bit different between the expectations or the embracing that both of them provide us in our outlook in life. Again, my friends, we're talking about life, we're talking about marriage, we're talking about children, talking about how to make sure our future is filled with appropriate outlook. I once saw a beautiful story about how do you determine what is a successful or beautiful marriage. If you come home and you speak and you report back, wow, did you see how many choices of food there was? There was a smorgasbord, there was the main dish, and there was this and there was that. If that's what you come home with and talk about, you didn't go to a marriage. If you come home and speak about how many flowers there were, flowers on the table, flowers hanging from the ceiling, all the different, flowers in the entrance, flowers in there, flowers under the chuppah. If that's what you come home with, you too never went to a wedding. If you come back from a wedding and speak about how many, audiovisual people were there, how many photographers were there, and that kind of thing, you too have not gone to a wedding. But if you come back and you speak about the holiness of the chassan and the kala, of the bride and the bridegroom, how they conducted themselves with extraordinary seriousness under the chuppah, and how thoughtful and how sensitive they are to each other. If that's what you come back with, if that's what you picked up, If that's what you were looking to see and you came home speaking about the greatness of the chassan and kala, then you went to a wedding. And that is a challenge, my friends. That's the challenge. It's not about how many course meal. It's not about, how many piece band there was. It's all about how you look, what kind of life, how is the man and the woman, the bride and the bridegroom, setting their life up. Because it all starts at the beginning, at the marriage itself. Now, there are lots of wedding anxieties, that goes along with it. Creating a dwelling place for God in this world necessitates spending money on holy acts. When an opportunity arises to spend even a small amount for a good purpose, let's not let it pass by. This applies to the wedding too. Even if the other party offers to pay for everything, you should make a point of contributing something. And different communities have different ways of how the two families share in the simcha, in terms of the expenses. Marriage is an everlasting edifice, and the preparations for a wedding should be the same, stable and harmonious. When the two sides' parents have disagreements about the details of their children's wedding, they should not involve the engaged couple. If both the bride's and groom's families have agreed on critical details of the wedding ceremony, would it be wise to renegotiate them? Come on. A wedding should bring together many people without being materialistic or extravagant. When it comes to spiritual matters, however, no expense should be spared to make sure it's the most beautiful and making such a big difference in so many different ways. So you can see, dear friends, finding a soulmate for marriage is not always easy. The search, for example, the Talmud tells us it is the duty of a man to seek out a woman. Leave your home and comfort zone and search for your soulmate with the same intensity that you would search for an important lost object. That's the search. Of course, your effort too. You have a soulmate. But finding your soulmate requires work. Don't expect them to be delivered on a silver platter. So your participation, going out there and making the connections is critical. A young man who lived in Israel had been suggested as a potential husband for an 18-year-old Yehudis fisherman, but she wasn't sure it was a good idea. The couple who had proposed the match didn't know her well, she recalled, nor what I wanted from life. Still, she felt pressured to pursue the opportunity. She had written to the Rebbe for advice when she was younger, and her first impulse now was to consult him. In this case, she decided a letter would not suffice. She took a bus to the Lubavitch World Headquarters in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Once she got there, however, she realized that she had no hope of seeing the Rebbe without an appointment, usually made months in advance. She was so overwhelmed that she just sat outside the building, sobbing. An elderly gentleman, who she later found out to be the Rebbe's senior aide, approached her and asked her what was wrong. She said, "I need to talk to the Rebbe." "Wait here for a minute," he murmured. He returned a while later and said she had an appointment for the very next day. This lady entered the Rebbe's study for the next day with great intrepidation. Her knees felt like jelly. She had to hold onto the desk for support. But as soon as I looked into the Rebbe's calm, clear, compassionate blue eyes, I relaxed a bit. She explained her situation as concisely as she could. The Rebbe's response was immediate and definite. He is in Israel and you are here. You are very different from each other. Remove him from your agenda. I walked out exhilarated. Yehudis said of that 1961 audience, I felt like I'd found a guide, an advocate, and a friend. I was no longer alone in this world. Sometimes later, she dated a young businessman, but again, she was plagued by doubts about their compatibility. This time, she made an appointment ahead of time through the Rebbe's office and traveled to Crown Heights on the appointed day. After she explained her dilemma, the Rebbe asked in Yiddish, "Do you like this man?" It was an obvious question, but coming from a rabbi, it took her by surprise. She gulped, "I have the basic love of a fellow Jew for him." The Rebbe responded, again in Yiddish, "For a husband, one must have more than plain basic love of loving a fellow mankind." So, how can a dating couple differentiate true feelings of love from the fleeting emotions that pass with time? There are two ways. First, they could continue dating to allow more substantial feelings to develop. Second, they could completely separate for at least a week or more. If they miss or long for each other and want to meet again, it is more than a passing infatuation. Another idea, my friends, is do not hypothesize about what is going through the mind of the man you are dating. What he may or may not think is not relevant. If there's no direct rejection and you're still able to communicate, continue to acquaint yourselves. Feelings matter. Even if your mind tells you the person has all the qualities you desire, the lack of physical attraction is a serious issue that has to be considered before making a decision. Very, very important. You know, there's a very, very, in the same line, the idea, the Beryl Futterfass, a person I know from London, had been exiled to Siberia for promoting Jewish observance in the Soviet Union. His mother was in England, and Beryl himself was studying in New York. So when he reached a marriageable age, Beryl had to rely on more distant relatives to help find a suitable match. His friend and cousin, the Chabad representative in Miami, Florida, suggested Naomi, a friend of his wife's, and Beryl was delighted. He knew the rabbi shared his ethos of Chabad activism, coupled with a fiery love for God and Jewish observance. Surely the girl would be a good match for him. Their first date lasted several hours. As they spoke about their families, Naomi revealed that her father was the rabbi in a particular synagogue. Beryl's initial impression quickly transformed in disbelief. I guess he wasn't so excited about the guy's father being a the lady's being a rabbi in another synagogue. Could the son of a man who'd given everything for Torah observance marry someone whose parents practiced, not exactly the way he liked? It was inconceivable. Is this what my father sacrificed for? He said to himself. The date ended at midnight, and Beryl went to 770, where the Rebbe was working late as usual. He penned an emotional letter describing the situation and handed it to the Rebbe's aide. The Rebbe's response was like this: "You are marrying the girl. Do not worry about who the parents are. You're marrying the girl. It's not about the parents." Wow. Beautiful, beautiful insight of the Rebbe of how he would respond to people in different situations. Determined to avoid the fate of their parents, who had died at the hands of the communists, I tell you about Zalman and Shula Kazin. They fled from the Soviet Union in 1946 with their young children and made their way to a displaced persons camp in Germany. 7 years later, with the assistance of HIAS, that's the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, they moved to the United States. HIAS arranged for an apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, but Shula wanted to live in New York, where the Rebbe and the majority of the Chabad community were located at that time. In a private audience with the couple, the Rebbe said Cleveland is also a nice place, with nice people and a good school. Turning to Zalman, he said, "In my opinion, you should be a ritual slaughterer, a shochet, be a rabbi, and lead the prayer services on the Sabbath and on the holidays." Not long after they moved, the Rebbe instructed them to reach out to the assimilated Jews in their area and encourage them to become more observant and to send their children to the Jewish school. So it was that the Kazans, the wounds of their own persecution still fresh, became the Rebbe's emissaries, imparting the passion for Judaism they had learned from their parents now to the Jews of Cleveland. We were taught that Jewish continuity, the future of the Jewish people, depended on the kind of courage that the Rebbe exemplified. This is the kind of bravery and commitment we try to emulate. Zalman said this in the year 2005. By then, the Kazans had been serving the Cleveland community for over 5 decades. Even as a young child, a young lady, the Kazan's daughter Devorah took it for granted that her family was guided by the Rebbe in all of their major decisions. Like her parents, she trusted in whatever the Rebbe advised her was for her good, for her own benefit. When it came time for her to get married, a list of names were drawn up and given to the Rebbe, who circled the name of a young man he thought would be an appropriate match. The couple would, of course, meet and get to know each other. Still, Devorah recalled a wonderful feeling that this is what the Rebbe had in mind for me. After meeting, the two decided to marry. In a private audience, Devorah asked the Rebbe for his blessing. Acknowledging that the match had been his own suggestion, the Rebbe asked, "Do you want to marry him?" The Rebbe suggested this young man, and therefore for sure I want to marry him, Devorah replied. "Do you want him?" the Rebbe asked again. The Rebbe suggested it. "Of course I want to marry him." The Rebbe became very serious. "Do you want him?" Devorah realized that the Rebbe would not be satisfied until she expressed her own preference. "Yes, of course, I want to marry him." The Rebbe showered her with blessings, adding, "Bring spiritual light and warmth around you, and it will be light and warm in your own home." So, I also want to share with you, there is huge volumes of Rabbi Schneerson's teachings and insight that are so helpful, to young couples, older couples, all kinds of issues with marriage, etc. And there's so much to gain and to glean from the Rebbe's teachings. I want to share with you what the Rebbe said to a person who was depressed because she could not find a spouse. And what the Rebbe say: every day in the morning you say 18 blessings, thanking God for your daily functions. This is a reminder to count your blessings before looking at what is missing. Thank God you have been blessed with good health, good parents, an education, a positive atmosphere, a good job. Clearly you want to marry, but while many suitable names have been proposed, it seems there is a constant search for faults and excuses to say no. When that attitude changes, said the Rebbe, everything in this area will fall into place. So you see, friends, it's a lot depends on how we look at things, how we approach things, and the differences that we make, especially at a time like that when it comes to making the decisions. I remember so many years ago, thank God, when I was introduced to my wife, Bluma, may she live and be well. We both lived in London, and there was a mutual friend of both my family and Bluma's family, and he suggested that this daughter of this family, the Strux family, should go out with the son of the Perl family. And it was fascinating. In those days, so many years ago, you didn't go to a bar, you didn't go to any hotel lobby or whatever. You certainly didn't go anywhere inappropriate. It was very, very, you could say, very serious, very conservative. We both met in a home, in the front room, in the living room of a home, and the family of the home was the shatran, was the matchmaker, and they kind of walked around outside there, and every few minutes they would come and say, "Is everything okay?" Yes, I said, "Yeah, everything is okay." And we met for the first time, And then we graduated from there. We actually went and met each other in a park, and continued our conversations. Now, let me tell you, dear friends, in the observant communities, when you go out, it's a serious thing. There's no going out just to go out for the sake of it, to have flings and all kinds of things. It's a serious. You're looking at each other. You want to see if there's a chemistry. You want to see if there's a commonality of goals and values in life. And it's a very, very, I want to tell you something. Looking back now, it was such an uplifting experience, because you didn't have to prove anything. You just had to be yourself and speak about your what you look forward to, and aspects of commitment, what life should bring. Should we be busy with going to business, or should we become emissaries for the Lubavitcher Rebbe? And we very much, both were focused on that. We both came from families, were committed to Jewish life. And, dear friends, it's so much easier. It's so much more, both aspects are, all this kind of approach makes such a difference. You don't have to, spend, months and sometimes years figuring things out and all kinds of things. It's a commitment. And we find in Judaism, when Isaac got married to Rivka, it says that he married her and eventually he loved her. One second. Don't you first love and then you get married? But the Torah is very specific that he married her. And Rashi explains he saw the traits, the wonderful traits of his own mother with her. Her Shabbos candles lit, lasted all week. He saw extraordinary spiritual values in that person that he was marrying. And she obviously saw that in him as well. So they got married, and then they loved each other. Surely there's an aspect of romanticness in the beginning, before marriage, but it's all within the environment of a serious approach to what life is all about. May Hashem bless all the young couples, all those who are getting married, and all those who may Hashem bless them to find the shidduch, and may Hashem bless us with all good news. Mazel tov. Mazel tov.